In this episode, we continue from identifying risk into analyzing it in a way that helps people make decisions. Finding a risk is only the start. Once you know what could go wrong, you need to understand how bad it could be, how likely it is to happen, who owns the decision, what protections already exist, and how the risk should be recorded. That is where risk analysis and risk registers come in. A risk register is a structured place to track known risks so they do not live only in emails, meetings, or someone's memory. It helps the organization compare risks, assign responsibility, and decide what to do next. For Security Plus SY0801. This topic is not about becoming a finance expert or an auditor. It is about learning how security teams explain risk clearly enough that the organization can act on it. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Risk analysis begins by slowing down and describing the risk in plain language. A vague concern like the database is insecure does not help much. A clearer statement would explain that a customer database contains sensitive information, has overly broad administrative access, and could expose personal records if an account is misused or compromised. That kind of statement gives people something to evaluate. It identifies the asset, the weakness, the possible event, and the potential harm. Without a clear risk statement, scoring becomes guesswork. You may see people argue over whether something is high risk or low risk when they are not even talking about the same problem. A clear description creates a shared starting point. It also helps later when someone reviews the risk and needs to understand why it was recorded in the first place. Impact is the harm the organization could experience if the risk becomes real. Impact can include financial loss, downtime, safety concerns, legal exposure, privacy harm, damaged trust, missed deadlines, operational disruption, or loss of important data. Some impacts are easy to picture, such as a payment system being unavailable during a busy sales period. Others are harder to measure, such as customers losing confidence after a data exposure. Security impact often connects to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality is harmed when information is seen by someone who should not see it. Integrity is harmed when information or systems are changed in an unauthorized or unreliable way. Availability is harmed when people cannot use the systems or information they need. When you assess impact, you are asking what the organization would lose, suffer, delay, or have to repair. Likelihood is the chance that the risk could happen under current conditions. It is not the same as possibility, because almost anything is possible if you imagine enough unusual events. Likelihood asks how realistic the risk is based on exposure, threats, weaknesses, history, and current controls. An internet-facing system with a known weakness may have a higher likelihood than an isolated system with strong access controls. A process that depends on one overworked person may have a higher likelihood of failure than a process with backups and review. Likelihood can also change quickly. If attackers begin widely exploiting a certain weakness, the likelihood may rise even if the technical weakness itself has not changed. When you evaluate likelihood, you are trying to avoid both panic and false comfort. You want a reasoned view of how probable the event is. Impact and likelihood are often used together because each one tells only part of the story. A risk with high impact and high likelihood usually deserves urgent attention. A risk with low impact and low likelihood may be tracked but not treated as a top priority. The harder cases are in the middle. A low likelihood risk with very high impact may still matter if the harm would be severe. A high likelihood risk with moderate impact may also matter because repeated moderate harm can drain resources and create lasting problems. This is why risk analysis requires judgment. A chart or scoring method can help, but it does not replace thinking. You still need to understand the environment, the business purpose, the data involved, and the people affected. The score supports the decision, but it should not become the whole decision. Risk owners are the people responsible for making or guiding decisions about a risk. The risk owner is not always the person who fixes the technical issue. A system administrator may patch a server, but the business owner may decide how much downtime is acceptable, what priority the system has, or whether an exception can be approved. A risk owner needs enough authority and context to accept responsibility for the decision. This matters because security teams often identify risks that affect systems, processes, or data they do not own. If ownership is unclear, risks can sit unresolved while teams debate who should act. A good risk register should name the owner so accountability is visible. Ownership does not mean blame. It means someone is responsible for understanding the risk, coordinating treatment, and making sure it does not disappear from attention. Current mitigations are the protections already in place that reduce likelihood, reduce impact, or improve detection and response. This part of analysis is easy to overlook because people sometimes describe a risk as if nothing protects the asset at all. Current mitigations might include access controls, encryption, monitoring, backups, network segmentation, security awareness training, physical locks, approval workflows, or vendor support. They do not necessarily eliminate the risk, but they shape how serious the remaining risk is. For example, a lost laptop is a different risk if the device has storage encryption, strong authentication, remote management, and no sensitive data stored locally. A vulnerable internal system is a different risk if it is isolated, monitored, and scheduled for replacement. Current mitigations help you judge the risk as it exists now, not as an imaginary worst case with no controls at all. There is also a difference between inherent risk and residual risk, even though this episode focuses mainly on analysis and registers. Inherent risk is the level of risk before controls are considered. Residual risk is what remains after current mitigations are considered. This distinction helps you avoid confusion when a risk sounds severe in theory, but is already strongly controlled in practice. It also helps when controls are weak and the remaining exposure is still too high. Imagine an application that stores personally identifiable information, PII. Inherent risk may be high because the data is sensitive and attractive to attackers. If the application has encryption, restricted access, logging, testing, and strong backup practices, the residual risk may be lower. The organization still needs to decide whether the remaining risk is acceptable, but that decision should reflect the protections already in place. A risk register is the place where these details are recorded in a consistent way. It may include a risk identifier, risk description, affected asset, owner, category, impact rating, likelihood rating, overall score, current mitigations, plan treatment, status, due date, and review notes. Different organizations use different formats, but the purpose is similar. The register makes risks visible, traceable, and easier to discuss. Without a register, risks can be forgotten after a meeting or rediscovered repeatedly by different teams. A register also helps leadership see whether important risks are growing, shrinking, waiting for funding, or blocked by decisions. It is not just a spreadsheet for compliance. It is a management tool. When maintained well, it shows what the organization knows about its risk and what it is doing with that knowledge. A risk register should be accurate enough to support action, but it should not become so complicated that nobody maintains it. The best registers use clear language and consistent fields. If every risk is written differently, scored differently, and assigned differently, comparisons become difficult. A risk about cloud storage exposure should be recorded with enough detail that someone can understand the asset, the issue, the impact, and the owner. A risk about weak access review should explain which access is involved and why it matters. Review dates are important because risk changes over time. A risk that was accepted last year may not be acceptable after a business change, a new regulation, a new threat trend, or a new system dependency. The register should help the organization revisit decisions instead of treating them as permanent. Qualitative risk analysis uses descriptive categories to compare risk. You may see labels such as low, medium, high, and critical, or scales that use words instead of exact money values. Qualitative analysis is common because it is easier to use when precise data is unavailable. You may not know the exact financial loss from a future outage, but you may still know that the impact would be high because the affected system supports customer operations. You may not know the exact probability of a credential attack, but you may know the likelihood is elevated because the system is exposed, accounts lack multi-factor authentication, MFA, and similar attacks have happened before. Qualitative analysis is useful for prioritization, communication, and early decision-making. Its weakness is that categories can be subjective if the organization does not define them clearly. Quantitative risk analysis uses numbers to estimate risk in a more measurable way. It may use financial values, estimated frequencies, recovery costs, replacement costs, lost revenue, or other numeric measures. Quantitative analysis can be helpful when leadership needs to compare the cost of risk with the cost of controls. For example, if a system outage could cost a large amount in lost business, that number can support investment in resilience. If a control costs far more than the realistic expected loss, leaders may consider another treatment option. Quantitative analysis sounds more precise, but it still depends on assumptions. Future events cannot be measured perfectly before they happen. The numbers are useful when they are based on reasonable evidence and clearly explained. They become dangerous when people treat rough estimates as guaranteed facts. Qualitative and quantitative methods are not enemies. Many organizations use both because each one helps in a different way. Qualitative ratings are faster and easier when you need to compare many risks across different areas. Quantitative estimates are useful when a risk needs deeper financial analysis or when a major investment decision depends on the expected cost of harm. You might start with a qualitative rating to identify which risks deserve more attention, then use quantitative analysis for the most serious or expensive decisions. The method should match the decision being made. A small access review finding may not require detailed financial modeling. A decision about investing in a second data center, replacing a critical system, or buying cyber insurance may need stronger numeric support. Good risk analysis uses enough detail to support the decision without pretending that every unknown can be perfectly calculated. The main idea to carry forward is that risk analysis gives shape to uncertainty. Impact explains how bad the harm could be. Likelihood explains how realistic the event is under current conditions. Owners make accountability clear. Current mitigations show what protections already reduce the risk. A risk register keeps all of this information in one place so risks can be tracked, reviewed, prioritized, and acted on. Qualitative analysis uses categories that are easier to apply across many risks. Quantitative analysis uses numbers that can support financial and business decisions when the data is strong enough. For Security Plus SY0801, do not memorize these terms as separate definitions only. Connect them into one practical flow. You identify a risk, analyze it, record it, assign it, review it, and use it to guide better decisions.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.